They did it. They actually went and did it. The Republicans have essentially nominated Donald Trump for President of the United States. Mm, mm, mm. This ignorant clod has managed to get himself effectively nominated for the American presidency by one of the country's major parties. Hey, this will be a day long remembered, ladies and gentlemen, but hopefully it will not be remembered in a good way. This is the first time in my entire life that I have actually felt genuine, visceral sadness and even dread at the outcome of any aspect or stage of an election campaign in any country. I've been following organized party politics in both my home country of Canada and in the United States for about a decade and a half now, since the turn of the century. The first election that I really followed closely, actually it was two elections. The elections held in the fall of 2000, both in the United States at the presidential and congressional levels, and at the federal level in Canada. Only since then have I been following organized party politics in any country. So far, I haven't seen any election results that really elicited a very strong negative emotional reaction in me due to the outcome of the election, or any part of the election, such as an early stage like this party primary and nomination stage in the US presidential election. Obama's election in 2008 did stir feelings of satisfaction in me. As a black person, I was very pleased to see one of our own reach the highest echelon of political power anywhere in the world. But of course, my libertarian views, to which I had come around even that early, 8 years ago, prevented me from entering wholeheartedly and unreservedly into a spirit of celebration. But I was still satisfied on some level to see a black man become president of the United States and leader of the free world. But other than that, that's it. No election has really had that deep an effect on me. Usually I can see the results of these elections coming. Not necessarily that far ahead, but, usually a few months in advance of election day, I can get a feel for who's likely to win. Usually I'm able to anticipate what the likely outcomes would be, and none of them are so far from the center that I'm genuinely disturbed enough at the prospect of so-and-so or a member of so-and-so party governing that the election result genuinely disturbs me. This is the first time that that's actually happened to me, ladies and gentlemen. This Trump, he's such a loose cannon and such a completely uninformed, loud-mouthed charlatan. The polls still seem to indicate that Hillary Clinton would blow him out of the water, and Lord knows I'm keeping my fingers crossed for just such an outcome. Not because I'm a supporter of Hillary Clinton, but simply because better her than Trump. Better almost anyone than Trump. I really think the man would be that disastrous, both for the US and for the world. There may be one tiny silver lining to this oh-so-dark cloud. It may be best summed up by what a friend of mine posted in her Facebook status earlier this evening as well. She wrote, "For those of you who are #NeverTrump or #NeverHillary, I ask that you consider voting Libertarian, with a capital L of course, this year. It's about time we get some fiscal responsibility and small government discussion in these elections rather than racist nonsense." She went on to write, "If the Libertarians get 5% of this year's national popular vote, they get federal funding and the ability to debate with the major parties. Your vote isn't going to sway anything in places like New York, but you can have an influence in the next election. Think about it." End of quote. This particular friend of mine is not really a full-fledged libertarian herself. She's one of those conservatives who is sympathetic to libertarians on a number of issues. The fact that she's contemplating voting Libertarian, for the Libertarian Party candidate, of course, is very encouraging to me. And it's especially encouraging because one of the candidates for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination happens to be former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. Now, this is the only politician whom I've heard of whom I can honestly say I could pretty wholeheartedly support in a given election campaign. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want this video to drag on too long, but I will say I am very, very impressed by Gary Johnson as a political figure. He is a politician who's not afraid to call himself a small L libertarian, and more recently, since 2012, a large L libertarian as well. Unlike pretty much any other libertarian politician, he actually has experience governing at the executive level. He's actually been a successful two-term governor of a mostly Democratic state. Now, here's a man who actually has executive experience, and he's someone who, judging by his views and the positions he takes on the issues, actually has a realistic, sober, level headed, and, as far as I'm concerned, reasonably well thought out approach to the philosophy of liberty and how it can be applied in the real world and in public policy. That's the reason why he is the only candidate whom I find even remotely appealing, especially at this point. He hasn't locked up the Libertarian Party nomination yet, and there's a chance that he might not. There are a couple of other candidates running. One, Austin Peterson, whom I think I may have met once or twice before, and John McAfee, the gentleman who actually, I think, invented the McAfee Shield. Now, they're running against Gary Johnson for the Libertarian Party nomination, and I don't particularly have much against them, except maybe that they might be a bit too doctrinaire for my tastes, too rigidly dogmatic. They might hew to too orthodox a conception of libertarianism for them to be really viable, worthwhile presidential candidates, especially at this early stage of the game when most Americans have not even heard of our philosophy yet. I think now, at this early juncture, when we're just now beginning to make our presence felt in American politics and put our names on the map, is the time for us to nominate someone who actually could conceivably get things done, and who at the very least does not take such rigid, doctrinaire, and frankly outlandish policy positions, outlandish from the point of view of mainstream politics, mind you, that he would risk alienating vast swaths of the American electorate right up front at a time when they're only just beginning to hear of libertarians and libertarianism and the Libertarian Party. Like my friend wrote in her Facebook status, the hope is that someone like Gary Johnson could at least perform well enough in the popular vote. I heard in a recent poll that he was polling as high as 11% at the national level. Hopefully he could perform well enough in the popular vote to at least allow the Libertarian Party to enter the presidential debates next time around at the latest. That way, with participation in the presidential debates, we can actually make an impact and just get our name and our message out there to that broad universe of American voters who are blissfully unaware of who we are. I remember watching an episode of John Stossel's show on Fox Business Network a few years ago. He was doing one of those jaywalking things, quote unquote, where he went out on the street and, held up his mic to people and asked them questions. He was asking them, what is a libertarian? I remember one guy said, a librarian who takes too many liberties? I thought that was a great answer that showed the main obstacle that the liberty movement faces right now, which is name recognition, brand recognition. We need to build our brand and get it out there. And the last thing we can afford right now is to nominate someone who is so dogmatic in his approach to libertarianism that he'll probably scandalize and alienate most voters when they're only just now beginning to learn of our very existence. But I will say this, for those of you out there, Republicans, who share my abhorrence of Donald Trump and yet also can't bring yourselves to vote for Hillary Clinton, I would have to say, if you live in a swing state, by all means, please vote for Hillary. The priority right now has to be keeping Trump out of the White House. Splitting the vote in swing states where your vote will actually count for something at the presidential level, that's no good. That's too risky. It would create too much of an opening, a potential opening for Trump. So if you live in a purple state, a swing state, by all means, for the love of all that is good, please vote for Hillary. I beg you. But if you're one of the majority of American voters who don't live in swing states, who live in states that can be taken for granted in either the Democratic or Republican column, please give the Libertarian Party a second look, and particularly if they have the sense to nominate Gary Johnson, someone who's actually done it. Someone who's actually faced the challenges of governing and has managed to be relatively fiscally conservative and relatively socially liberal at the same time. That's the kind of standard bearer the liberty movement needs. And Republicans who feel out in the cold as a result of the presumptive nomination of Donald Trump, I think libertarianism is where you need to be. I hope you won't be disappointed.